It was a Tuesday in late October when the phone buzzed on my kitchen counter. I had been preparing dinner, distracted by the clink of the pot and the hum of the dishwasher, when my mom's name lit up the screen. Calls from her were rare, like spotting a deer in the backyard, so my heart skipped a little. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, expecting a client, but the screen said, "Mom." I hesitated for just a second, then picked it up. "Elise," she said, her voice warm but thin. "We're throwing Dad a 60th birthday party next month. Nothing big, just family. Can you come?" I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. A 60th birthday party. No big deal, just family? My mind wandered back to the old dining room table at home, my mom's famous scalloped potatoes, and the cake from the bakery down the road. There was a sense of comfort in those images, a kind of familiarity I hadn't realized I missed until now. "I'll be there," I said, already mentally shuffling through deadlines, trying to figure out how to make everything fit. After 3 years of silence, no calls, no birthday cards, no text messages even on the holidays, this felt like a small crack opening in a door that had been shut tight for so long. Maybe we could sit together, eat, and talk without the usual strain. Maybe this time things could be different. But a week later, I called to firm up plans, ready to buy a bottle of wine or grab a gift. The phone picked up with Dad's gruff hello, pulling me right back into years of clipped, awkward conversations. "I'm driving down Friday," I said, keeping it light. "Need me to bring anything?" There was a long pause, the kind that makes your stomach tighten. Finally, he cleared his throat, and I could hear the faint shuffle of papers in the background. "Elise, about that," he said. "Connor's bringing his new girlfriend, Leia. She runs a charity. Real classy." My heart skipped. Charity. I wasn't sure what that meant. She sounded perfect, poised, charitable, the kind of person Mom would adore. "We'd rather you didn't come," he continued, his tone flat, making my chest tighten. I blinked, feeling a sharp sting at the back of my eyes. "What?" I managed, my voice catching. "Your job," he said, as if it were obvious. "All that digging into people's business. It's messy, embarrassing next to her. Just stay home." I felt the room around me tilt slightly, like the world was spinning at a different pace. Stay home? For what? Because I did investigative journalism? Because I dug for the truth? Was that a crime? I pressed on, my voice rising despite my efforts to keep calm. "You're serious? You're picking her over me?" His tone hardened, like a door slamming shut. "Stay away, Elise." That's it. And just like that, the call ended, leaving me standing there, the phone still held in my hand like it had just slapped me. I set it down slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the crisp fall air outside. The mountains stood stoically, as if they, too, were holding their breath. My hands trembled as I curled my fingers into fists. My mind swirled. I had spent the past 3 years wiring money, $11,200 in total. Every month, I quietly transferred money into their accounts. Rent, groceries, the little extras they never asked for but always took. I'd done it without complaint. Without being asked. Mom would mention how tight things were, how much Dad's meds cost, and I would just transfer the money. No thanks. No acknowledgement. But now, standing there in the stillness of my kitchen, the math hit me hard. $300 a month for 3 years. And this was how it ended. I sank into a chair, staring at my bank records on the screen. There it was, line after line, automatic payments to Mom and Dad, steady and reliable. But now, the quiet ache of knowing that I had carried the weight of their lives for so long, and yet, I wasn't even invited to sit at the table when they had what mattered most. The call had ended, but the silence that followed felt louder than any argument could ever be. My heart raced as I stood there in the kitchen, staring at my phone, still in my hand, as if expecting something to change. Something to make it all make sense again. But there were no second calls. No apologies. Just emptiness. And my hands clenched tighter around the phone, the sting of his words still fresh. I should have been angry. Furious, even. But instead, there was this hollow feeling. The kind you get when you realize the truth you've been hiding from for too long. That your whole life has been wrapped in something thin, fragile, and the moment it's pulled, you realize there's nothing underneath. I sat down at my desk and opened my bank account, scrolling through years of transfers, text messages, and receipts that seemed to pile up before me like a mountain of unpaid dues. Every month, there was a familiar routine. Another $300, another $500. Always just enough to keep things from breaking, to keep things from showing the cracks. I paused on one payment from 6 months ago. It was the largest transfer I had made in a while, $2,000. There was no reason listed. No text from my mom asking for help, no mention of it being a medical emergency. Just the transaction, like it was normal. I clicked on the confirmation number. I needed to know. The details showed that the money had gone to a different account. One that wasn't connected to Mom or Dad. One that had a name I didn't recognize, Leah Thompson. I froze. Who was she? I spent the next hour diving into the web, searching through profiles, public records, and whatever information I could find. And there it was, a record of her charity. An online presence. Photos of her posing with kids in other countries, holding oversized checks, and making speeches about building a better world. She was the image of grace. The picture of a philanthropist. The kind of person you'd see on magazine covers. The kind of person Mom and Dad would celebrate, while I was left in the shadows, quietly paying the bills, keeping the lights on. And there was more. I found the same name, linked to a bank account under a charitable fund. The same name that had been tied to a series of large deposits. Deposits I didn't remember authorizing. In fact, I didn't remember her being mentioned until now. I leaned back in my chair, feeling my stomach tighten. How long had she been in the picture? Had she been part of this from the start? Had my parents been hiding her? Or worse, was she the one pulling their strings? I shut my laptop and sat still. Every number, every transaction, every little deposit made me sick to my stomach. I wasn't just the backup. I wasn't just the one who fixed everything. I was the last resort. Every time they needed something, a roof, food, a favor, I was the one who made it happen, but in the end, I was the one who was pushed aside. It wasn't just the birthday invitation. It wasn't just the Zoom call. It was everything. The way they let me hold everything together, and the way they hid behind their smiles, pretending I was invisible, until they needed me. And now, it all made sense. Leah had come in and swept my parents into her world of charity and good causes, while I was left to pick up the pieces. They didn't want me at the table. They just wanted her image, the perfect girlfriend, the perfect partner for their new story. But I had been the one holding them up for years. The next day, I couldn't sit still. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear my dad's words. "We don't want to see your face at her graduation." But that wasn't the most painful part. No, it was the quiet realization of how long I'd been ignored, how long I'd been invisible, to make room for someone else. I had to know who Leah was. Who exactly was this woman my family had latched onto so quickly? I spent the next several hours digging into her life. Not just on the surface, but deep. Beneath the polished charity work and the speeches on selflessness, there was more. Much more. Leah wasn't just some angel who showed up out of nowhere to save my parents. She had a history. One that hadn't quite made its way into the narrative Mom and Dad were building. I found public records for a past charity she ran. It was a well-meaning venture, focused on helping underprivileged children. The problem? It was fraudulent. In the past 3 years, there had been multiple complaints from families claiming they never received aid or resources they'd been promised. A few audits had found missing funds, but the case had quietly vanished from the press. The charity was closed, but Leah? She'd moved on, starting something new. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She wasn't just playing with my parents. She'd been playing everyone. Her perfect image wasn't just carefully crafted, it was manufactured. Leah knew how to manipulate those around her. How to wrap her every lie in a glossy bow, making it just believable enough for people to turn a blind eye. And my parents? They'd bought into it completely. My father, ever the passive figure, was drawn to her energy. Her promises. Her charity. Mom was, as always, just following the path of least resistance, hoping for someone or something to fill the hole she'd let remain in their lives. I had been the one filling that hole for years, without asking for anything back. I never expected thanks. but I never expected to be discarded in favor of some shiny new version of a perfect family. Then it hit me. I wasn't just the quiet sister. I wasn't just the one who made it easier for them to pretend their lives were perfect. I had been the backup plan. The one they called when everything else went wrong. But they didn't want me for anything more. And Leia was just the latest in a long line of people who would be better than me in their eyes. Someone who could be manipulated into the family narrative of perfection. I found a series of emails between my mom and a former member of Leia's old charity. They were discussing new projects. Something about clean slate opportunities. The first one I looked at was written 2 weeks before the birthday conversation, before the Zoom call. It's time for us to move on from the old ties. Elise has always been difficult to deal with, and it's better if we keep the future focused on Leia and the kids. Difficult to deal with. That phrase hit me like a punch in the stomach. It wasn't just that I wasn't invited. It wasn't even about the graduation. It was the way they had already mentally excluded me. The way they'd written me out of their lives without even telling me. Mom had already made up her mind. And now, it wasn't just about me being embarrassing to the new girlfriend. It was about keeping Leia's story intact, even if it meant erasing the past. But that wasn't happening. I knew what I had to do, but the anger still simmered beneath the surface. For years I had allowed myself to be the invisible one, the one who quietly picked up the pieces. But today, I wasn't going to sit in the background anymore. The truth was too big to ignore, and I had been carrying this weight alone for too long. It wasn't just the money, it was the years of being pushed aside, treated like I didn't matter, and constantly being expected to fix their messes. What hurt the most was that I had never even been given the opportunity to say no. No one had ever asked if I wanted to help. It was just assumed. And I had never spoken up because I told myself it was my responsibility. But now, it was time to change that. Time to take back what I had given so freely and, for the first time, ask for accountability. The first thing I did was get a lawyer. Not for a lawsuit, not yet. But for protection. My lawyer was a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Angela. I'd found her through a colleague who had dealt with a messy family business dispute, and Angela had the reputation of being able to cut through the noise and get results. I explained everything, the family dynamics, the money transfers, and the way Leia had wormed her way into their lives. Angela took notes, listened patiently, and then turned to me, eyes sharp and assessing. "You've been supporting them for years, and in a way, you've been complicit," she said. "But now you've got leverage. It's time to stop playing by their rules." That hit harder than I expected. Because it was true. I had let them take advantage of my quiet loyalty. But it wasn't too late to make it right. The first thing Angela advised was to stop sending money. I'd been covering bills, paying rent, and buying groceries for months, even though they never asked. Now it was time to cut the financial lifeline. I blocked their accounts from my bank. I called the landlord and made sure they had no claim on the next rent cycle. And most importantly, I sent a letter to my parents. The letter wasn't nasty. It didn't name-call or try to guilt-trip. It was calm. It was straightforward. To Mom and Dad. After much thought, I have decided to end all financial support moving forward. I have given what I could, but I can no longer continue to shoulder your responsibilities. I have also decided to cancel all future payments for any shared expenses. If this is an inconvenience, I will not be able to assist. This will be the last communication regarding this matter. It wasn't dramatic, but it was final. And for the first time in a long time, I felt empowered. The next day, I got a call from my mom. But not the usual, guilt-heavy, emotional appeal. No. She was calm. Too calm. "I understand you're upset," she said. "But we didn't know what else to do. Leia has been very kind to us." Kind. That was the word she used. Leia, the perfect girlfriend. The savior. The woman who never asked for help, never needed anything, and always made them feel like their lives had meaning again. But it was clear now. My parents hadn't just replaced me. They'd found someone they could manipulate without any emotional baggage. Leia was easy for them. And she was using them just as much as they were using me. I didn't argue. I didn't fight her words. Because the truth was clear. I was expendable. My usefulness was gone. I had stopped being the reliable one, the one who fixed things. I had become the one who demanded more, and that wasn't the role they wanted me in anymore. And I wasn't about to beg for their approval. The days after my letter passed like a slow, deliberate exhale. I didn't hear from my parents. Not right away. I expected them to make some sort of attempt to reopen communication, to pull me back in, but that didn't happen. It was almost too quiet. That was when I realized something. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted to pretend I was never there at all. I didn't immediately feel bad about that. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table. I had tried that for too long. But it felt strange. Almost like a wound that had scabbed over without me even realizing it. The only messages I received came from Leia. She was, of course, the calmest one. She didn't come at me with accusations. No emotional pleas or attempts at rekindling the family spirit. She just sent a simple text. "Hope you're doing well, Elise. I think we need to talk." I never responded. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing how deeply her presence had shifted everything. I didn't need to say anything to her because she was the symptom of a much bigger issue, my family's manipulation and my role in it. But then, one evening, I received a call that changed the course of everything. It was Dad. His voice was different. Softer than I'd ever heard it. Like a man who was trying desperately to piece together a version of the truth that didn't hurt too much. "Elise, we need to talk." I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Apologies? Some kind of plea for forgiveness? Maybe. But I wasn't holding my breath. "It's about Chloe," he continued. "I don't know if you've noticed, but she's been different lately. There's been some stuff that's come out. She's been lying to us. She's been using us, and I guess I just wanted you to know that we finally see it." There it was. The truth. He didn't say it directly, but I could hear it in his voice, the guilt. The regret. He finally understood the extent of her manipulation. The question wasn't whether he had figured it out. The question was why it had taken him so long. After everything, the money, the lies, the carefully constructed image, why had it taken him this long to come around? I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before responding. "You're just figuring this out?" He sighed, a sound so heavy with regret that it broke through the usual walls I'd built up to keep him at arm's length. "I didn't want to see it. I guess I thought it was easier to ignore it than face the truth. I've failed you, Elise. I've failed Chloe. And now everything's falling apart." I didn't let his apology land, though. It wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. Not after all these years of watching him brush aside every warning, every sign that something was off. I spoke slowly, carefully. "It's not too late to fix it. But it's going to take more than words. Actions. Real actions. You can't keep letting her play you." We talked for a while longer, and by the end of the call, there was no resolution. No finality. Just the shared knowledge that the family's web of lies was finally starting to unravel. But the truth always has a way of working itself out. Slowly, but surely, cracks started to form in Chloe's perfect image. Family members began to notice things. How she would disappear when things got difficult. She kept finding new ways to push the blame onto others, especially me. When I received a message from Mom, it was clear that they were no longer united in their story. It was fragmented. "We're sorry, Elise. We've realized we were wrong. Can we try to rebuild from here? We've done things wrong. Can you forgive us?" The message didn't come with a call, a heartfelt gesture, or warmth. It was just more words, apologetic without weight, and promises they would never keep. The message from my mom, though apologetic, felt hollow. They didn't understand. They never had. No amount of words could fix what had been broken, and no plea could erase the years of manipulation and control. At first, I thought about giving them another chance. I thought about the old family dinners, the comfort of familiar faces around the table, the longing for reconciliation. But then the reality of their behavior hit me again. I was always the one to fix things. Always the one who carried the weight. Always the one who played the role they needed me to play. But not anymore. This time, I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table. I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't seen the truth. I was tired of apologizing for existing, for having boundaries, for wanting respect, for not being a doormat. So I made a decision. A real one. A decision that didn't involve their approval, their expectations, or their guilt. I set up an appointment with my lawyer, Angela. The time had come to draw a clear line. Over the past few years, I had silently funded their lives. My bank accounts had been the safety net they leaned on whenever they wanted something. My financial help had allowed them to pretend that everything was fine. But it wasn't. And now it was time to take back what I had given, to protect myself. When I walked into Angela's office, I felt a weight lift from my chest. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking in with hesitation. I wasn't second-guessing myself. I wasn't worried about their feelings. I was taking control. Angela looked up from her desk, her calm gaze assessing. She didn't need to ask many questions. We had already discussed my situation over the phone, and she knew the history of financial support I'd been giving to my parents and Chloe. "I think it's time we start looking at your options," Angela said, her voice steady. "We can freeze their access to any accounts you've shared. We can send a letter making it clear that all support is terminated. And we can do it legally, with no room for them to play the family card. I nodded. The plan was simple, clean. My bank accounts, which had once been a secret lifeline for them, would now be a fortress, and I wasn't going to back down. "How do you feel about filing a formal letter, saying this is the last time you'll offer financial help?" Angela asked. I didn't hesitate. "Do it," I said. "Make it final." She nodded and began typing, drafting a letter that would make it clear: no more help. No more late-night bailouts, no more financial fixes. No more pretending that I owed them anything just because I was the one who had always held things together. I sat there as Angela worked, feeling a new sense of peace settle over me. I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't angry at Chloe for manipulating me or my parents for enabling it. I was just done. Done with the lies. Done with the guilt. Done with being their backup plan. It was time to be my own. Later that week, I sent the letter. It was clear. It was direct. And it was final. To Mom, Dad, and Chloe. I've decided to stop all financial support moving forward. I've covered many of your expenses for years, but it's no longer something I will continue. I will no longer be sending money for rent, groceries, or any bills. This is not up for negotiation. I have already assisted in full, and I will not be involved any further. Please consider this my final decision. There will be no further help or contributions. This is not about family. This is about taking control of my life. The next day, my phone buzzed with messages, not from Chloe, not from my mom. It was Dad. "You're making a huge mistake. Chloe is just trying to be independent. She's struggling." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd said what needed to be said. I realized then that I had been terrified of making waves. Terrified that saying no would break something that couldn't be fixed. But the truth was, I was already broken. I was already fractured. And it wasn't their fault. It was mine for not speaking up sooner. Now, I was finally standing up for myself. And it felt more like freedom than anything else. The day after I sent the letter, I woke up to a quiet I hadn't felt in years. No phone calls. No texts. No new emails begging for attention, for explanations for me. And for the first time in forever, that quiet wasn't unsettling. It wasn't empty. It felt like a deep breath, like my lungs had finally expanded after holding my breath for so long. I didn't check my messages for a while. Didn't even bother to look at the missed calls. What was the point? I already knew the pattern. The complaints, the guilt-tripping, the endless apologies were designed to make me feel like the villain in a story I never wanted to be a part of. Instead, I focused on myself. I focused on my life. I spent the morning at the farmer's market, something I had always told myself I'd do but never found time for. I picked out fresh herbs, talked to the local bakers about their sourdough, and felt something I hadn't felt in a while: peace. I decided to spend the afternoon at my favorite spot on the lake, a secluded little place where the trees hung low over the water and the silence of nature drowned out everything else. I took a deep breath and sat on the dock, letting the calm of the water wash over me. As I sat there, I realized something. I had spent so much of my life trying to fix the broken pieces of my family. I had convinced myself that if I just kept giving, if I kept being the dependable one, I could earn their love, their respect, their acknowledgement. But the truth was, I had been asking for something they didn't want to give. I had been demanding something that didn't exist, a real connection, based on respect and understanding, not obligation and guilt. It wasn't until I stopped playing by their rules that I began to find my own. By the time the sun was setting, I felt lighter. The weight had lifted. I had let go of a family dynamic that never truly valued me for who I was. And in its place, I was starting to discover who I was without them. Not the person they needed me to be, but the person I had always been deep inside. The next day, I got a call from Chloe. Her voice was strained, trying too hard to sound calm, like she thought I would crack under the pressure. "Elise, what's going on? Why are you doing this? You're not just going to leave, are you?" "We're family." I didn't answer right away. For a moment, I let her words sit there, because I could hear the guilt she was trying to push onto me. But I wasn't playing anymore. I had stopped letting people manipulate me. "I'm not leaving, Chloe," I said. "I'm just choosing not to be your backup anymore. I'm choosing me. For once, I'm going to stop carrying everyone else's load and carry my own." There was silence on the other end of the line. She didn't say anything for what felt like minutes, the weight of her confusion heavy in the air. Then she finally spoke. "You really don't get it, do you?" she said softly. "We need you. I need you." I wasn't sure what she meant by that. I didn't need her to explain. It wasn't about needing anymore, it was about wanting. Wanting the real version of me, not the one who kept everything from falling apart at their expense. "I don't owe you anything, Chloe," I said, my voice firm. "And you don't owe me an apology. But what I need is space to find out who I am without all this." She didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, she said, "I don't know what to say." I hung up before she could say more. Because I didn't need the closure I thought I did. I had already found it in the quiet, in my decision to finally take control of my life. Weeks passed. Months even. And nothing really changed with my family. They kept going with their lives, building their version of the story. Mom and Dad tried to reach out, but their apologies were always followed by the same tired excuses. How hard everything had been, how they didn't mean to hurt me. But I had stopped needing them to apologize. I had stopped needing them to see me in a way I'd been begging for my entire life. I had seen myself. And that was enough. There's something incredibly freeing about walking away from people who can't see your worth. You stop waiting for their acknowledgement, and start realizing you've always had the power to define your own story. And when you finally do, that's when you start living your life for you, without guilt, without compromise.